Hello. So how do you make your own plugins from the Game Maker Studio to IDE? Well, first you need to find out where the IDE is installed. I bought the thing on Steam, so I can just right click on the Game Maker Studio 2 desktop label, go to Properties, then Local Files, and then Browse. And then I need to copy over the Zeus plugin loader files. You can download them on the GitHub releases. It's just two files, you copy paste them into the IDE directory. You don't have to replace anything, it's just two new files. And then you need to run the IDE at least once. It should throw a warning from the Zeus plugin loader that you're doing this for the first time and that it will create a directory for new custom plugins. And yeah, so here we have a warning. Hello, a custom plugins directory has been created. Place plugins there and restart the IDE. But what if we want to make our own plugin? Well, for that you'll need to have one thing installed, Visual Studio 2015 or newer, and C# support installed. I mean, not C# Universal, the Universal Windows Platform, .NET Core, .NET Standard, no. You'll need regular .NET Framework C# support in the Visual Studio. I mean .NET Framework. So you make a new project. For the language you pick Visual C#, and for the target you pick Windows Desktop, and then for the type you pick class library .NET Framework. And then you must specify in the target version of the project that you're targeting .NET Framework 4.5. Not newer, not older, exactly this version, because this version is used by Yo-Yo Games to build GMS2 and all of the plugins on Windows. On macOS they use Mono for Xamarin, but since we're targeting Windows right now, you need to pick .NET Framework 4.5. Then you pick the location and, well, a random name for your plugin. It can be whatever. So made a new project, and then we actually need to tell the project to link with the Game Maker Studio 2 APIs. For that you go to References, then right click on it and click Add Reference. Well, I already added a bunch of Game Maker Studio 2 stuff there, but let's imagine it's not there at all. You'll probably end up with a window something like this, or even this. So to add GMS2 DLLs there, you click on Browse, and then you browse to your IDE installation folder. And you need to add IDE.dll and also utilities.dll. These are the two most required DLLs for plugin development, because IDE defines the whole IDE stuff and utils.dll defines some required attributes, for example module name. And I click on OK. Visual Studio will hang for a bit, maybe, and then you can define your namespace inside the Yo-Yo Studio plugins namespace. So namespace Yo-Yo Studio namespace plugins, and then you just copy and paste the original code generated by Visual Studio. Then you need to actually define the plugin configuration. For that, in the auto-generated class you can inherit from the iPlugin interface, and of course you need to implement it. And then in this initialize method you need to make a new plugin config, and the constructor for config takes three parameters: a name, a description, and a required flag. Please never set the required flag to true in custom plugins, because you will screw up some stuff in the IDE. This required flag is only used by the particle editor and some other plugins in the GMS2. But for the sake of this video we'll always just set it to false. So a name can be anything, description can also be anything, and required must be set to false. And you just return the configuration. But that's not all, because if you just return a plugin config that doesn't define any commands, then Game Maker Studio 2 will think that your plugin initialization has failed and it will refuse to load the plugin. So you need to add at least one new command. Let's make a new class for this. Of course, don't forget the namespace thing and the braces. Yeah. So a regular plugin class inherits from an iModule and from an iDispose interface. Yeah, iDisposable. Of course, we can just let Visual Studio to implement this with the dispose pattern. You don't really have to touch anything here, but here you can get reference to an ID interface provided by GameMaker. And you also need to define a module name attribute that will describe your command in a few words. So it takes a name and a description. Again, for a name it can be anything, some command. For description it can also be anything, some description. And this method will also be called when the ID is loaded, but not when the plugin has just got loaded, but when the ID is showing you the recent projects menu. So we can try throwing some message dialog here. I think it's message dialog. Yeah. And show unlocalized warning. Basically everything in GameMaker Studio 2 expects you to give a string ID from the CSV file, but since we don't have any CSV files ended in the project, we'll use the unlocalized functions for now. Title can be some title, some message, and we can ignore the rest of the parameters. Then in the plugin configuration we can call the add command method. Again, the command name. This must not include any spaces or uppercase letters, it can only include lowercase letters and underscores. And for the actual command you have to use ID loaded. And when you use ID loaded, you tell GameMaker that the GameMaker needs to execute this command, instantiate the instance of the command, when the ID is loaded and is displaying the recent projects menu. And description can also be absolutely anything. For the operation you decided to create, so the command needs to be instantiated only once. And for the payload you need to specify a type of class of the command class, because type of returns, yeah, it returns a type class. Then you can build the plugin. Oh, alright, you have to define an x64 configuration in the configuration manager. Here you click on active solution platform, you click on new, select x64, OK, close, and you should always build your plugin in the x64 configuration. It doesn't matter which one, release or debug, but you have to build for the x64 platform. So here's the plugin DLL. Then we can copy this plugin into the custom plugins folder and try running the IDE. And if we've done everything correctly, we should see our unlocalized warning dialog saying some stuff. Yeah, we do. So we have a custom plugin that displays our custom message, and yeah, that's basically it. Have fun.